Hello and welcome to PGurus channel. I'm your host Sri Iyer. The invitee, the guest that you're going to see today is it's his first time on PGurus channel. He is I should say he's an author. He frequently contributes to Swarajya Mag. That's where I've read most of his stuff, but I'm sure he has also written in other places. And like me, he's also a technocrat. He spent many years in the United States in Bell Labs, and then after that in the Silicon Valley. And now he's back in Bengaluru. And his articles have really provoked me to think differently. And some of my thinking has changed in some of my day-to-day things. One of the reasons is his incisive writing. Rajeev Srinivasan, welcome to PGurus channel.
Thank you very much, Sri. That's very kind of you to say. I have also been reading your work, which is incisive, as you said, and an inspiration to people because you just go straight to the heart of the matter without, fooling around, right? So that's wonderful. I have been writing actually on UDF for a very long time.
Oh, right. That's right. Yeah.
95. Now, right. And I was writing more about Indian culture and foreign affairs and so forth for them. But in the last couple of years, maybe 3-4 years, I've confined myself a little bit more to innovation, which is what I've been teaching at IIM Bangalore for a few years. Although I actually live in Trivandrum, that's where that's what I call home. And I spend time in Bangalore whenever I have to teach because I'm not a full-time faculty. And then I do a bunch of other things, consultancy kinds of work. So that's how I keep body and soul together. So thank you very much for this opportunity to come on board PGurus and to speak to your audience. I appreciate that.
And it is, thank you, Rajiv. And it is our honor to, talk to Rajiv about how he sees the politics of Kerala. Viewers, you may have seen our episode on Tamil Nadu. Now this is the next one we are doing about Kerala, and you're going to have other states following in quick succession. So Rajiv, let me just give you my understanding of Kerala. Kerala has been proud to state that they have 100% literacy for many years now. And yet, when it comes to elections, we see some patterns. There are primarily two fronts, the UDF and the LDF. And then there is BJP trying to make a mark. And the closest BJP came to was, I think, and I could be wrong about this, and please correct me, was that when Rajagopal lost to Shashi Tharoor by 8,000 votes in Trivandrum. And that looks like that's where you live. So why don't we start from there? And maybe you can lead our viewers through the complicated math that exists in Kerala politics. Who's jumping ship from which front to other? Take it away.
Right. You're absolutely right, Sri. It's allegedly an educated state, but it's a very good example of the maxim that literacy is not equal to education. Because yes, it's true that there's 100% or so, or maybe close to 100% literacy, but that has not led to an educated choice in the sense that people have not been able to create a mechanism whereby they maximize the returns to themselves, which at the end of the day is what politics is all about. And we do have these two sort of motley crews. One is the LDF, the Left Democratic Front, and the other is the UDF, the United Democratic Front. It boils down to basically the CPIM, that is the Marxist Party and Friends on the one hand, and the Congress Party and Friends on the other hand. And there are a number of other parties that jump ship now and then. For example, there is the Muslim League, the Indian Union Muslim League, and they are in fact sort of a coveted partner for both these fronts. Whichever front comes to power, usually they bring the Muslim League on because that's a swing factor in a way, right? So there is that. And then there is a plethora of Congress parties in Kerala, because there was initially the Indian National Congress, and then there's the Kerala Congress that split off of it. And there are like 3-4 variants of the Kerala Congress. Each of these is a little bit of a splinter party, but together, they form more or less a coherent vision on one side. Similarly, on the other side, you have the CPIM and its parent CPI, and then you have smaller parties like the RSP and various other parties like that. For example, there is this party that was created by Srimati K.R. Gauri, who used to be a stalwart of the CPIM, and she had a falling out with them for very interesting reasons. We may get into that later. And then she formed her own party. And so there's a bunch of splinter parties as well. But the net result is that whenever you have an assembly election, it's sort of either, you mentioned Tamil Nadu, they're usually the same thing. It's either DMK and friends or AIDMK and friends, and it's, a switch every 5 years. So here it's almost exactly the same thing. You put in one set of rascals, and you get sick and tired of them, and 5 years later you bring in the other set of rascals. And for the average person on the street, it really doesn't make any difference because they're equally corrupt, equally incompetent, and equally full of bombast. So in particular, an interesting thing about Kerala is the demographics. If you look at the 2011 census, it suggests that it's about 47% Hindu and about 25% Muslim and about 20% Christian or something along those lines. But there's been a significant element of conversion. And so I'm pretty sure that by now, 2019, the Hindu numbers have declined further. And there's also this phenomenon of people who convert to Christianity but retain their Hindu names because that's the way they can continue to take advantage of their reservations as scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, etc.
That's a pan-India phenomenon. Rajiv, that's a pan-India phenomenon. Please continue.
This is true. Yeah, this is true. But it's been tried and tested for a long time in Kerala. So, for example, I knew a guy who used to go by the name Prabhakaran, and it's only when I got an invitation to attend his funeral that I realized he was actually Joseph. So he was buried in a church. But so that's been going on for a while. So even though these numbers suggest that it's, whatever I said, 45% Hindu and 25% Muslim and 20% Christian, it's probably a little bit more skewed. I would imagine that it's in the low 40s for Hindus and close to 30% for Muslims and probably another 25 to 27% for Christians. And this is relevant because there is a significant amount of voting by both religion and jati in Kerala. Okay, so if you look at the geographic area of Kerala, it's basically three areas. There's the northern part, otherwise known as Malabar, which used to be a part of the British Madras Presidency. Then there was the princely state of Cochin, and then the princely state of Travancore. So Cochin is sort of in the middle, and Travancore is to the south. And if you look at the demographics, there is a significant number of Muslims in the northern part, Malabar, and in fact, in some parts of Malabar, they're the majority. In the central part of Kerala, for example, the district of Ernakulam, which is the original Cochin, Christians are the majority, and also in some other some hill districts there, Idukki, Pathanamthitta, and Kottayam, again they're a majority. And then you come to southern Travancore, then Hindus are a majority. So there are some significant, I would say, patterns of behavior that are determined by the demographics. So typically what happens is that, so this is one, the geographical spread. The second is the jati spread. If you look at the Hindus in Kerala, the largest group is the Ijava, and that's an OBC community, which accounts for probably about, I would say, roughly 20% of the population, total population. And the next is the Nair community, which is a forward caste, and they probably account for about 15% of the total population. And then you have a number of other communities. So, for example, the Brahmins, the native Brahmins of Kerala, the Nambutiris are very, very few in number. I would imagine they're like 100,000 or so. That's it, in a state of about 30 million. That's a trivial number. and then you have a variety of SC/ST jatis. SCs, the Pulayas, for example, are fairly significant. So there is a jati divide as well, and frankly, what's happened there is that the Ijavas have been the stalwarts for the Marxists. And traditionally, the Ijava vote has been very strongly a vote bank for the Marxists. The Nayars have been typically Congress supporters, although some of them have become BJP supporters. And as far as the other communities are concerned, they have not been quite so polarized. They vote for multiple candidates. So that's also interesting to think about. So, as I said, in assembly elections, what happens is the LDF wins once, and then next 5 years they rule, and 5 years later, UDF comes to power. So right now, the LDF is in power. I think it was in 2016 that they got a fairly solid majority. But by usual form, by 2021, it's going to switch and the Congress is going to come back into power as they had been before 2016. Now, I presume the topic of interest really is what's going to happen with the Lok Sabha elections that are due in the near future. Now, Kerala has never ever elected a BJP person to the Lok Sabha. As you correctly pointed out, the closest the BJP came was in 2014 when Shashi Tharoor won by a rather small margin over O. Rajagopal, who's a party stalwart, and he had been Minister for Railways in NDA 1, I think, and he's a well thought of person. So what's interesting is that, I mean, I actually, I'm quite chummy with Shashi Tharoor. You know, I've known him for years. His relatives live in California, so I used to know them well from there and so forth. And I think he's a great candidate. He has a lot of charisma, but his numbers have shown a little bit of decline. In 2009, he won by over 100,000 votes. So he was sort of at the peak of his charisma at that time. And I have the sneaking suspicion that the entire female population of Trivandrum voted for him, you know, because he was extremely, I mean, a very handsome guy, very well-spoken guy. And there was sort of a, I don't know, mad rush, you know, female hormones acting up or whatever. But
you know the moniker that he is addressed by in Twitter, right?
Shampoo Boy?
Yes.
Well, I mean, he does have great hair, you know. It was Barbarian, you know this guy, Barber Indian, right? He's the guy who came up with that.
Yes.
That name for him. Barber Indian's pretty cool guy. But anyway, so he seemed to suffer a decline in popularity in 2014. So he barely scraped through with 10,000 votes. Now, he continues to be popular and he's very visible. And of course, all constituencies want someone who looks good on the national stage, right? So that is still a consideration. And he still draws the crowds. And he's obviously an extremely well-spoken person. You know, when he first showed up here, his Malayalam was quite poor, I should say, but he's managed to pick it up, and he's great at kissing the babies and, you know, pumping the hands and, you know, shaking hands and whatnot. And he goes to all the what they call Kudumba Yogams, that's the family get-togethers. This is a trend in Kerala, you know, all the large families get together, or you have a resident association coming together, and Shashi goes to them. And so he's seen around town quite a bit, and people are kind of proud of him. You know, he's our MP, you know, great guy. He wrote these books and he beat up the British and all that. So there is still a significant amount of goodwill towards him, I would say. So he's a very strong candidate. The other candidates who are in the fray, one is a CPI candidate, the Communist Party of India candidate named Mr. Divakaran, who is not I mean, anywhere near as prominent as Shashi, but before Shashi won, this was a CPI seat. So you got to remember that there is a residual amount of goodwill that CPI has. And of course, the entire left is going to support that person. So he will, you know, take away a fair number of votes. And then the BJP I don't think they have formally announced their candidates, but all rumors point to Sri Kummunam Rajashekharan, who was the former BJP chief in Kerala, and he had been given the post of a governor of, I think, Mizoram or Meghalaya. I'm getting
That
confused.
is right,
Mizoram.
Mizoram, and he just
Right.
resigned it and returned back to Kerala, right?
Did. So the rumor mill suggests that he is going to be standing against Shashi. And Kummunam has a tremendous reputation as a man of the people. He's a totally Gandhian person. You know, he has been in politics for a long time. He owns nothing. You know, he just has, you know, like Abdul Kalam or somebody, he's got a small suitcase and that's his worldly goods. And he's not married, and so he doesn't have anybody that he needs to bring up and so forth. So he's a person with a tremendous reputation as a Gandhian, almost aesthetic person. Also, as a very nice guy. You know, he's a person who listens to people, he respects people, so forth. He doesn't put on any airs. So there are a number of things in his favor. And furthermore, he was active in several emotive Hindu issues in Kerala. Some years ago, there was the Nilakal incident where on the way to Sabarimala, there is what's called Ayyappa's Poonkavanam, which is his garden, his flower garden. And Nilakal is part of that. And all of a sudden, there was this allegation that an ancient cross had been discovered there, a 2,000-year-old wooden cross that had been installed by the so-called Saint Thomas. And it created a bit of a fuss. And Christians said, look, this is ours, it's our cross, this is our property. And Kummunam led a struggle to say, look, this, first of all, doesn't stand to reason, because in Kerala's humid climate, a wooden cross is not going to last 10 years if it's buried, not, you know, speak of 2,000 years. Plus, it's highly contentious as to whether, quote unquote, Saint Thomas actually came to Kerala. It's extremely unlikely that he did, and it's highly likely that his name was conflated with another Thomas, a gentleman named Thomas of Canaan, who came as a refugee roughly 345 CE, so several centuries after Thomas is supposed to have come. But in any case, the Nilakal agitation was successful, and these claims were put aside. And the next agitation that Kummunam led was the Aranmula agitation. And I'm going into a little bit of detail here. I hope it's not going to be overkill for your listeners.
Not at all. Not at all. I think India needs to understand all its, you know, plurality. I mean, this is an excellent way to understand what are the small nuances. Please continue.
Sure. Aranmula is the site of a very old and very famous temple, the Parthasarathi temple. And it also has another claim to fame, which is that there is this Aranmula Kannadi, or Aranmula mirror. It's a remarkable metal mirror made out of high tin bronze. And it appears as though it's a direct import from the Saraswati era, because similar high tin, highly polished bronze mirrors have been found in the Saraswati cities of like Lothal, Rakhigarhi, and so forth. So it appears as a possible you know, lineal descent from that. And this gentleman named Kalyan Raman, whom some of your listeners will
Dr.
know,
Kalyan Raman, yes.
Dr. Kalyan Raman.
Yes, yes.
And he is an expert on the Saraswati language and so forth. And he has a very remarkable conjecture, and I can't resist mentioning it. He is of the opinion that the Saraswati era people got their tin from Hanoi, from the Malay Peninsula, because that's the only place in the vicinity that has tin deposits. And it appears as though there was this remarkable continent-spanning supply chain. The tin was mined in the Malayan Peninsula, and shipped either via rivers or across the Indian Ocean by ship all the way to the port of Lothal on the west coast near, I guess, near the run of Kutch. And then it spread up the Saraswati to a variety of workshops. And then the product of those workshops, which were Bronze Age workshops, those products have been found in Bahrain and in Haifa, Israel. So this is amazing. He calls it the ancient tin route, which is, like 2,000 years before the ancient Silk Route. This is a conjecture. We haven't got actual proof of it, but it's a very interesting thought. But anyway, so Aranmula is the only place in the world, so far as I know, where these metal mirrors are made these days. And the clay in the fields, the paddy fields of Aranmula, is unique. And that apparently adds to the luster of the highly polished mirrors. Anyway, so it's a somewhat unique ecosystem. And there has been an effort over the last few years to build an airport there, allegedly for the comfort and benefit of pilgrims going to Sabarimala.
So essentially, commercialization of Sabarimala.
Among other things. But I also think it was intended for other purposes. One is there is a big convention of Christians called the Naraman Convention, which is in that vicinity. So it could definitely bring people from all over the world. It's the largest Christian grouping or convention in Asia. It could certainly bring people for that. But also, I think there was an element of land grab, because a lot of land was captured for this purpose through dubious means, including a lot of fields. And eventually the High Court, nullified that and said, look, you got to give the land back. And if you've made any changes to it, you got to, undo those, etc. But what was happening there was, apart from everything else, it didn't make any sense according to the rules of airports, because there are two airports within 125 kilometers. Trivandrum is, I think, 110 kilometers from Aranmula, and Cochin is 120 kilometers. And there is no reason to have an airport when there are two, fairly substantial international airports within a stone's throw. So it was essentially a very peculiar land grab kind of thing, and there were a number of other hidden motives, I think. So Sri Kummunam was very active in this agitation, and it also succeeded. So those are things that have more or less endeared him to at least a section of the Hindu population in Kerala. So there are, there are things that Kummunam brings to the picture. There are things that Shashi brings to the picture. Things that Mr. Divakaran brings to the picture. So Trivandrum is going to be tight. But all things considered, this is one of the few constituencies in which the BJP actually has a chance. So that's one thing to note. Another constituency where the BJP has a fighting chance is Kasaragod, at the very other end of Kerala on the Karnataka border. And there too, some of BJP's candidates in the assembly election did rather well and lost by relatively few votes. Excuse me. And so there is a chance there, and a couple of other constituencies, Pathanamthitta, which is where Sabarimala is, and Thrissur. These are spoken of as rather lower probability, but there is a chance for the BJP. But very candidly, yeah.
Quick question.
Yeah.
So sorry, I'll just ask my question and then you can reply. So the two constituencies you mentioned, Kasaragod and Thrissur.
Trivandrum.
No, Trivandrum. I'm talking about.
Yeah, okay.
I want to talk about these two because looks like there could be some polarization there because the population demographics are like 50-50 or something like that. Could you expand on that also? Please continue your answer and then you can address this question.
Right. Yeah. So, if you look at the population in Kasaragod, there is a fairly large Muslim population there. There is a large Hindu population. And Malabar is generally a stronghold of the Marxists. So when you say Hindu population, quite a few of those nominal Hindus are likely to be uh, CPR, or rather CPM. Now, there is a very strong question as to how the CPM vote. For example, it's not unheard of that the CPM will ask their cadres to vote for the Congress candidate to prevent a BJP candidate from winning, and vice versa. You know, a Congress candidate or a Congress where the CPM is strong, the Congress may vote tactically to support them. So that's part of the complication in Kasaragod. And then in Thrissur, well, in Kasaragod, there's relatively few Christians, so they don't actually form a significant part of the electorate. In Thrissur, so Christians do. Um, Almost, I would imagine, 30% or more, I don't have the numbers on the tip of my fingers, of the electorate in Thrissur would be Christian, and there's a significant Muslim population as well. Interestingly enough, where Guruvayur lies, the assembly constituency that Guruvayur is a Muslim majority constituency called Chavakad, and always a Muslim wins from there. So there's Christians, Muslims, and Hindus in Thrissur, and same thing in Pathanamthitta. So this leads me back to the question of the Jati issue. In 2016, I think the BJP ran a rather, I would say, good campaign. They tried to bring together the fractious Hindus. I mentioned the Ijavas and the Nayars. They're at loggerheads. They're constantly, fighting with each other about what I consider to be imaginary issues, issues that may have had resonance a century ago, but they don't make any sense anymore. But the fact is that the two are fighting with each other all the time. So the BJP tried very hard to form a united front of Hindus by saying, but what they did very, I think, rather nicely was they put forward three iconic Hindu leaders. One was the Ijava leader, Sri Narayana Guru, and the Nayar leader, Chatambi Swamigal, and the Pulaya leader, Mahatma Ayyankali, and their entire campaign literature, which incidentally was very good. I was impressed by the amount of work they put into it. Featured all three, and so they tried hard to create that feeling of Hindu unity. Unfortunately, it didn't work, even though the BJP had an ally, which was the BDJS, which was an Ijava party. However, the majority of Ijavas did not follow the BJDS's strictures or desires, and in the event, finally, the BJP got 15% of the vote. So I'm thinking that's about 10% of the vote that's accounted for by various Hindu groups, and 5% would be the Ijava vote that was brought by the BDJS. So 15% was what they got. Now, this time, the BDJS is keeping aloof. And frankly, what happened there is I think the BDJS was expecting some reward from the BJP in terms of a ministry or something, and they didn't get it, which irritated them. Whether that's a reasonable thing or not, that's my reading of what happened. Everybody likes the fishes and loaves of office, right? So it didn't happen. So this time, that vote bank of Ijavas who are not communists is not available to the BJP either. Okay, so that may eat into their votes a little bit. As far as the Ijavas are concerned, I've spoken to several people. The Ijavas still seem very, very strongly communist. Although I know a number of Ijavas who over time have migrated away and have become very Hindu and, temple going Hindu and so forth. There is a significant number of them that are ideological. And I think that's not going to change. The time hasn't come. And interestingly, I think the BJP made what I think was an ill-advised move during the Sabarimala agitation, because what I think they thought is that the Marxists were going to do so many bad things, and in fact they did, extremely unpleasant things to Hindus. They thought this would lead to a significant consolidation of the Hindu vote in favor of the BJP. And therefore, I conjecture that the BJP did nothing. They could have headed off some of the, really, I would say, police state kinds of things that the CPM did against, poor, unarmed, peaceful pilgrims. They beat them up, they made life very difficult for them, and all in the interest of getting these activist women into the temple. These are not, pious women. Some of them were Christian, some of them were Muslim, some of them were communists. Incidentally, in Kerala, communism is a religion for all practical purposes. Those who are communists truly believe, this blind faith. Anyway, so it was remarkable the amount of grief that Hindus faced in the Sabarimala agitation. And the fact that not only did the BJP not do anything, they didn't even say anything for a long time. Okay, I thought that was a mistake, because I think that the calculation was that the CPM would become so unpopular as a result of their Gestapo techniques that there would be a groundswell of support of people moving away from the CPM to the BJP. This did not happen. In fact, the people who benefited, in my opinion, are the Congress, because the Congress kind of stepped aside and made some polite noises. They said, we, support the Hindu cause. And now let's remember that just a few months before that, your listeners would be interested in knowing this, the Congress had ceremoniously slaughtered a cow, okay, which is sort of a dog whistle to their own vote banks, i.e., the Christians and Muslims, to suggest to them that no, the Congress was not going to fold and become, Hindu Twa or Hindu party, BJP B, BJP light or anything like that. They did this publicly. They slaughtered a cow and then they distributed the meat, cooked it and distributed it to people and so forth. So that was certainly not a very pro-Hindu thing. Although I should also mention that a significant number of Hindus in Kerala do eat beef. Okay, this is a result of many years of cohabiting with Christians and Muslims. But anyway, that was a pointed statement made by the Congress. And that, I'm sure, did piss off a number of Hindus. I mean, certainly I know that I got pissed off about that. You're kind of rubbing our nose in it. But during the Sabarimala agitation, I think they were able to, by being sort of weasel-wordy, by saying things that were non-committal, they are the ones who are going to benefit from the Hindus that were so irritated by the CPM that they left the fold. So that really didn't work in the BJP's favor. And I think that's why I believe it was a major miscalculation for them to do that. Because they could have done a number of things. They could have potentially brought an ordinance like they did in Tamil Nadu in regards to Jallikattu. Now, if there were some legal objections to that, they could have potentially dismissed the Kerala government because there was a significant law and order problem. And there is a precedent for this. In 1959, Jawaharlal Nehru dismissed the first CPM government of EMS Namboodiripad, alleging the same thing, law and order situation. And in fact, it was probably less of a law and order situation than now. So the government at the center could very easily have followed that precedent. Or a third thing, there is an old, there is a very old treaty, that's the 1947 treaty between the government of India and the Maharaja of Travancore, which provides certain, rights to the central government. It could have used those, the central government could have used those rights to just take over the Kerala Devaswam Board or Travancore Devaswam Board, under which Sabarimala functions, or it could even have taken over the district of Pathanamthitta. So there were several options. And what hurt was that neither did they use those options, nor did even Sri Narendra Modi say anything about it, which, quite frankly, was a blow to many Hindus in Kerala who are strong BJP supporters, because you had to explain why the center was not paying any attention to Kerala. There is a school of thought that says, listen, you guys are never going to elect any BJP people, so why should the BJP pay attention to you? Well, Narendra Modi ji is the prime minister of all Indians, not only the people who voted for him. So if some Indians are being troubled or are being oppressed, it's his responsibility to look after them as well. Okay, I've gone a little bit off on a tangent here, but my belief is that the BJP did not gain electorally at all from the Sabarimala agitation. In fact, if anybody gained, I suspect it is the Congress. And as a result of all this, there are 20 seats in Kerala, and I suspect, and the CPM themselves are saying this, they are likely to not hold on to many of the seats they have at this time, the 2014 seats, which I don't remember exactly how many they had. I think they had 16 or 17 or something like that. This time, they'll probably get 3 or 4. And the Congress is going to do rather well and get the other 10 or so, or 10 or 12. And the BJP may get, at best, well, wildly optimistically speaking, it may get 3, but more realistically, it may get 1 or 2 or maybe 0.
And now something happened today. Mr. Vadakan, Tom Vadakan, has switched loyalties from Congress to BJP. And also there is one minister in BJP, George Alphonse. I don't think he's still a minister, but for some time he was a minister. He was also from Kerala and also a Christian. So this may have been an attempt by BJP to woo the Christian groups in Kerala. Do you see much of a wave from that?
Well, I do believe Alphonse is still a minister. I think he's a minister of tourism and maybe electronics or something. Anyway, he's a minister. Yeah, see, remember I mentioned earlier about how the BDJS was kind of put off? Well, they were expecting that sole ministership that went to Kerala. So they were really pissed off when, instead of them, who had stood by the BJP in the 2014 elections, that ministry went to Alphonse. And yes, I think it was, again, an attempt to woo the Christians. In my personal opinion, that is completely foolish, because the Christians, rightly or wrongly, and I think more rightly than wrongly, believe that the Congress is their party. Because when the Sonia government was in power, and I pointedly say Sonia government, not Manmohan government, because there was a whole lot of influence of Sonia in that pretty much half the big time Congress people in Kerala, most of whom happened to be Christians, ended up in top jobs in the center. So there was this very strong correlation. You remember how Antony became defense minister and so forth, right? So Kerala Christians, and also people who got into the Supreme Court. There was this guy, Kurian Joseph, who was in the Supreme Court, and a whole lot of Kerala bureaucrats became big-time bureaucrats in the center. So they did well. So Christians have every reason to believe that the Congress is their party, and they do. And there have been many allegations of priests very directly telling their flock, you must vote for the Congress candidate, right? And there were videotapes, and actually not videotapes, audio tapes circulating with certain Congress candidates explicitly making that connection, saying that, look, you're Christians, we're a Christian party, you have to vote for me, and things like that. So wooing the Christians is, I think, a very bad case of not doing triage, because the Christians in Kerala are the kind of people the BJP can generally write off. I mean, there might be, I think, maybe 100 Christians in Kerala who support the BJP, and I can name, most of them. There is, so yeah, they'll get 100 votes. They would have gotten 100 votes even if they didn't get Alfonso on board. There's this C.J. Isaac, for example, a professor, and there is P.A. Verghese, and there is Anjali George, interestingly enough, she's in Germany, and she's spearheaded the Ready to Wait movement of women saying, look, we are willing to wait till we're 50 to go to Sabarimala. But yeah, so that didn't make a whole lot of sense. Now, with Tom Vadakan, I have followed his rise in central government circles over the years. If I'm not mistaken, he was the media guy. He was, to put it bluntly, he was a propaganda guy for Sonia. And for him to have a sudden change of heart, I think two things must have happened. One is he must have had a really big change of heart. And the second is the BJP must have promised him something, which has to be a seat, right? I don't know what else they could promise him, or maybe a ministry or something, I don't know. But I look at Tom Vadakan, and I'm sorry to say that the immediate name that flashes to my mind is this is Sudhindra Kulkarni 2.0. If you remember Sudhindra Kulkarni,
yes,
he was a committed Marxist, and all of a sudden, he was a big shot in BJP circles, and he was the conscience keeper of L.K. Advani.
Yes.
And I'm pretty sure that that was Advani's, Waterloo. I'm pretty sure that that's what caused.
Race to the bottom.
That's indeed. And in fact, I wouldn't be surprised if Kulkarni had a role in the IC 814 result, where the BJP caved in. So I'm like,
in fact, we put out a cartoon today about that, but please continue.
I didn't see that yet. But, so, I mean, Kulkarni was a complete disaster for the BJP. And I have the feeling that Tom Vadakan could be potentially equally a disaster. So I have no idea why they did this.
Now, one takeaway, I just want to ask you this question, hypothetical question. Let's say BJP puts up some really good candidates. I'll give you some examples. Mr. Mohanlal, this is the film actor, and say engineer Sridharan. I'm just giving some names, doesn't mean that they are going to be there. But these are people who are, they're known for their work. And these could cuts across religious lines, I think. What do you think would happen if BJP were to get such kind of candidates?
Kerala is not that friendly to film stars. Very few film stars have done well in politics. There's one guy, Innocent, who is an MP right now, but I think that's an aberration. Other film stars have been defeated in elections before. So I'm not very sure that Mohanlal, first of all, will run, because he probably will lose on his own cognizance. And secondly, I'm not sure the BJP is ready to have him as a candidate. Now, E. Sridharan is a different kettle of fish, if you ask me, because I wrote several years ago, maybe 10 years ago, that he should be the president. When Abdul Kalam moved on, I said, here is a man of impeccable achievements and impeccable integrity. This is the kind of person we need as a president, rather than yet another politician. But of course, nobody listens to me, and it didn't happen. But so Mr. Sridharan has an aura of having, as you know, accomplished a great deal, like the Konkan Railway and then the Delhi Metro, and he's been instrumental in the Cochin Metro as well. So, I mean, on his own cognizance, he may get a bunch of votes. And of course, if he stands as a BJP candidate, Now the question is where. He's from Palakkad, and I'm not very sure. I didn't, do my homework on Palakkad per se. I don't know if he would do well if he stood there. And if he were to be moved to another constituency, then there is this general issue of, helicopter delivering a candidate to a constituency where they don't have any roots. That often doesn't go very well with the grassroots people. But yes, I mean, my own biased view is that Mohanlal running may not, set anybody on fire, but Mr. Sridharan may have a better chance just because he's so well known and he's so well thought of.
Also, the cryogenist scientist, Mr.
Nambi Narayan.
Yes, Nambi Narayanan.
Yeah. I don't think Nambi Narayanan will run for a couple of reasons. One is he really was broken. He has been running from pillar to post for a little bit of justice for, 20 years. And as an engineer, as a scientist, I doubt if he has the stomach for campaigning, right? I mean, I was talking to an interesting person some time ago who could potentially have been a candidate, but he was saying, look, I can't do this. I can't do the grassroots campaigning stuff and, all the arrows in my back and so forth. So I think and this is a professional person. So I think Nambi Narayan, similarly as a professional, and I would say is a somewhat elderly gentleman. Of course, Mr. Sridharan is even older than him. But I rather doubt if Mr. Nambi Narayan will stand. And if he does stand, I'm not sure. I really am not sure. But I should also mention that, talking about candidate selection, the BJP did a very poor job in the 2016 assembly election because they put up Mr. Kummunam Rajashekaran against a very, very strong Congress candidate. And, we could have told, I could have told anybody, this is a bad constituency to put him into. Put him in the next constituency where they went and put in Srinath, the cricket player, who lost. But if Mr. Rajashekaran...
You mean Srishant?
Srishant, I'm sorry. It's Srishant. And if Sri Rajashekar, Kummunam Rajashekaran had competed from that constituency, he might have won. But in the other constituency, which happens to be where K. Karunakaran's son, Muralidharan, has been the MLA for many years. And he's a really good politician, and he does things for his constituents. So he's not going to be easily dislodged. So there is that issue of choice of candidates and choice of constituencies. The other thing that I believe is hurting the BJP, which it has for a long time, is infighting, because BJP suffers from not having too many really strong leaders in the state, and the ones that are there don't seem to, all pull together as a team. There's a lot of infighting and a lot of, accusations and so on and so forth amongst them. And that's a major problem because you have each individual's own people, doing certain things, running off on all sorts of tangents away from the, this is the BJP story, this is the BJP candidate, let's all pull together as a team kind of thing. Although, having said that, I saw the campaign in 2014 in Trivandrum, and I think I mentioned a little while ago, I was quite impressed. They did a good job. It, almost worked, right? Because Shashi was on tenterhooks. He was trailing much of the time, and it was a late push from a couple of coastal constituencies which have a lot of Christians. Coastal fishermen are mostly Christian, and that's where he kind of pulled ahead and won in the end. So it's by no means a done deal, but speaking as a BJP well-wisher and supporter, I wish they had done a few things a little bit better. Notably, they should have done something more visible during the Sabarimala agitation because it really hurt the feelings of a lot of people. And as is widely discussed by pundits, see, the issue for the BJP is not that people are not going to vote for them. They're faithful and their supporters will still go and vote for them, but they may or may not have the same level of enthusiasm as I had in 2014. And they may not go out and, I've noticed this on Twitter, for example. There was this guy who said, I've been a lifelong RSS BJP guy, but I'm not going to, I'm not going to go out and beat on, I'm not going to beat the bushes and knock on doors and things like that because I'm so upset with what they didn't do for Hindus, right? So that is the other key concern for the BJP. Are you going to be able to enthuse the cadres and the well-wishers and the sort of fellow travelers and so forth to go out there and tell their families and their friends and so forth, you got to do this, you got to bring Modi back, and this is an election for Modi, and it's not an election for the BJP. But one final thought on that is that uh, um, a silver lining for the BJP in Kerala may well be that people are voting for Narendra Modi, not for the BJP. Even people who may not vote for the BJP in assembly elections may vote for Modi. Okay, so that is another factor because I don't think Kerala was particularly badly affected by any of the policies that the BJP government has pushed through. For instance, demonetization was not a huge problem here so far as I could tell. And GST turns out to be rather, beneficial for us because otherwise everything that came into Kerala, which basically means everything we eat, would spend days at the check post and be delayed and you have to pay money to bring it in and so forth. So the fact that road transport has become considerably easier and a little bit cheaper and so forth has actually been beneficial to Kerala as a very large consuming state. So I think the policies have not been bad. And then, of course, there is a certain amount of goodwill regarding the entire Pulwama, Balakot, F-16, Abhinandan, that whole thing. So I may be a little bit more pessimistic than I need to be, but I still stand by my claim that the BJP at best will get about 2 seats, and the possibility exists that they won't get any seats or 1 seat.
Thank you very much, Rajiv. That was a very revealing, in-depth analysis of Kerala and its politics. Viewers, no other state will you see politics being done 24/7. You go on any day of the week. There's only one major highway, by the way. I could be oversimplifying here, but along this highway, there'll be at least 2 or 3 meetings, 20 people, 30 people sitting in, listening to somebody say something. I mean, I have been blown away by that because there is elections in any other state. There's this 15, 20-day window where everything heats up and then everything goes back to normal. Not Kerala.
Not Kerala. And this is good and bad. There are a couple of reasons for this. One is that everybody is very political. That's one. The second is that Kerala is geographically rather different from other states because in other states you have a town and then you have some empty space and then you have a village and then you have empty space and then you have a village. Well, there's no empty space in Kerala. The entire state, and as you mentioned, yeah, there is this National Highway 66 that goes up and down the entire length of the state. The whole thing is populated. There is no break, right? Which means that you have to look at Kerala in some sense, not as a state, but as a massive conurbation. It's a city. It's a giant city. Okay, it may not look like it because there are very rural-looking parts of Kerala, but everywhere the population is very dense and everybody is, out there in the mornings. Another thing that you may observe is that there are all these what I call chayakadas, these tea shops, and every morning there'll be one guy sitting there reading the newspaper out loud, and all the other guys are listening not because they can't read, but it's his turn to read it today, and then they're all talking about, I don't know, world affairs, and usually saying rude things about Trump and Brexit and whatnot. So they're very conscious, but that's the good part. The negative part of it is that there is politics for its own sake. And if you come to Kerala, not only will you see these meetings, as you mentioned, Sri, you'll almost inevitably see a strike. And there'll be a bunch of guys with red flags, blocking the road, or, chanting slogans in front of the secretariat or something. Okay, so it's an industry. And I think the whole bunch of people whose livelihood is based on, yeah, I get 500 rupees and biryani and a bottle of rum for today's agitation. And if you ask them, they may not even know what the hell they're agitating for. They're just there, this is interesting because there was this so-called women's wall that was set up by the communist government a few months ago as part of their side of the Sabarimala issue. And some media people were out there talking to people, women, of course, it's a women's wall, and saying, what is it that you're doing here? And they're like, we don't know. We were told to come stand here, and so we're standing here. So that also exists, that there is this tendency to just agitate for the sake of little money or whatever. Some Enrega people, I believe, were also told to go stand in line in the women's line in a women's wall. Anyway, so yeah, there's too much politics here, and it pervades the atmosphere, which is kind of not so great.
The era of professional protesters was perfected in Kerala, I would say, and it's now slowly but steadily also spreading to the other parts of the country. So thank you very much, Rajeev. We'll be back with such insightful interviews.
Thank you, Sri. Appreciate it. Good chatting with you.